Hello and welcome. I'm Catherine from Crystal Bakers' Costumes, and this video is all about making the Mohn cardigan by Engineering Knits. This is a very fun vintage-inspired cardigan with little bobbly dots made by tuck stitches. Micah from Engineering Knits based this cardigan pattern on one of the vintage cardigans in her own collection and has scaled it up and written out very clear instructions. I'm very much looking forward to making this, and I'm planning to pretty much follow the pattern with just a couple of changes. Firstly, bringing the sleeves down to full length, and also accounting for a larger bust than is standard. Now, I have already started, so let's catch you up to where I am now. For this project, I'm using 8-ply from Bendigo Woolen Mills in a red and then 2 cream colours, which are slightly closer together in colour than I was imagining when I ordered them, but are still different enough that they'll add some depth and variance. So the first thing I did was knit a stocking net swatch as per the suggestion in the pattern. The pattern recommends 3.75mm needles, which is what I started with. My stockinette swatch then suggested that I should go down to a 3.5mm, which, when I knit my swatch in the dots, actually I needed to go back up to the 3.75. So I guess my thought is there, if you're just slightly off in the stockinette, maybe stick to the recommended and try the dots first. Next I did some experimentation that's not in the pattern, but is for what I want to do, which is to be able to increase over the bust. So I had a couple of practices of increasing, and on my second time I was pretty happy with how that was working. So that's my plan for in the actual cardigan. Then I felt comfortable and it was time to cast on the actual cardigan. So I started in red, my main colour, background colour, and cast on the bottom. So this is knit from the waist up. So cast on all my stitches for around the waist and then knit a knit 1 purl 1 rib section for that bottom. In general, I think I prefer the look of knit 2 purl 2 ribbing sections, but then again, one thing I like about following patterns explicitly is that it forces me to do something that maybe I don't have as many of in my wardrobe, and then gives me a bit of wardrobe variance, which is something I find in both knitting and sewing. Once the ribbing was done, it was into the actual dots and time for some of those tuck stitches with the colour and the fun part of this cardigan. So after knitting rows 1 to 4 in my contrasting colour, I switched back to my main colour, and here I had to tuck down every few stitches, which I find with this yarn it is fairly sticky. I do need to really bring that needle down to secure it and then pull the stitches out to get rid of them and make sure I really catch the ones behind. So it is a bit of a process, but I got the hang of it in the end. So I alternated my contrasting colour, and I've done 3 rounds so far. And at this point, I'm ready to start increasing for the bust. So I have a 46-inch bust, and that is pretty much 26 at the front and 20 at the back. So I started by knitting the 40-inch size, and that's where I've got to at this point. And now I'm just going to increase the 2 front panels to increase the room at the bust. What I find in general clothing that hasn't been made for busty persons is that the back is too wide and too long, and that the waist, if it fits over the bust, it doesn't fit at the waist. If it fits at the waist, it doesn't fit over the bust. So that's something I love about making my own things, is I can play and develop and work out a way to make something that actually fits me. So there you are all caught up, and it's time for me to keep going. So I'm now going to keep knitting, and I'm going to start those bust increases. I'll come back in a little bit once I've got something to show you, and we can talk through exactly what it is that I'm doing to create these increases. So I've been making good progress knitting on this cardigan, and I've done 2 more rounds of the pattern, which means I've done 6 rows of increases. And I still have 2 more increase rows to get to bring me to a total of 8 increase rows. So let's have a closer look together, and I'll talk through why it is that I want to get to 8 increase rows. Right, so what are we looking at? Well, we can see the beautiful stitch pattern overall, and over here we can see where the bust increases are happening. So I've got this bust point stitch marked, and we're increasing either side of it at certain points. So at rows 1, 5, and 9, we are doing increases on either side of this centrally marked point. Now that means in total, when we do 2 stitches per increase row, and we're spreading them out, as I did swatching to work out what the spacing was that I wanted. So in total, if we do 8 rows with an increase, that means it's a total of 16 increases for each half, so 16 over here and 16 on the other side of the bust. And the reason for that is, well, first of all, it needs to be divisible by 4. And more than that, I was hoping for divisible by 8, because then we can do it symmetrical on either side. And if we have a look at the 4 stitches over here, to get an increase of 3 inches is pretty much the 16 stitches. So because 3 inches on each half gives us the total of 6 inches of bust increased, going from a 40 to a 46 as a beginning point. So either we'd be increasing 8 stitches, so here to here, which would give us a 1.5-ish inch increase, or by going the 16 total, here to here, it gives us just over the 3. And I mean, it depends where you're doing your gauging, doesn't it? So over here, it's bang on the 3. So that's how I knew I wanted to have a total of 16 stitches increased, 8 on either side of our central increase point, and through my swatching I knew the spacing that I wanted them. It's not invisible. I'm not claiming it's invisible, but I just think that overall, when the garment's being worn, you won't notice the dots being a bit weird too much, because, you know, some bits are more pulled, some bits are less pulled. I think it will just flow, at least that's my hope. And so that's what I'm doing. And so essentially for rows 1 to 4, you're just knitting across, purling back, knitting across, purling back for the 4 rows of stockinette. And I'll just show you my increases. So we've knit up to the marker. Now we're going to make one right, pass the marker, knit, pass the marker, make one left. So there we are. Okay, let me knit to the other side and then I'll show you that again. So now we've reached the other front. So we'll do the same. make one right, pass the marker, knit, pass the marker, make one left. So now I just knit to the end of this row and keep going on rows 2, 3 and 4, which is just knitting back and forth in stockinette. So I've now done rows 1 to 4 of the pattern, all 4 of the contrast colour. So let's now go again. And this one, a row 5, is the trickiest because it's got both the tuck stitches and increases, which is a bit pesky. So let me just go slow and show you what I've been doing. So 1, 2, 3. Tuck. 1, 2, 3. Tuck. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here we are. So we've done the 3, then we're going to tuck down to there, and then it's 1, 2, make one right, slip the marker, and then that's between the markers is a tuck stitch. And then making one left, 1, 2, 3, and then into the next tuck. Oh, a bit tricky. 1, 2, 3. There we can see we've now increased all of the increases we're going to do, so we have the correct number of stitches. And those are slightly small, but that's okay. It will flow eventually. So with that, I have finished all my increases for the bust. In total, I've increased 16 stitches on each side of the cardigan. If you trace up those dots, we can see we now have an extra 4 dots in the middle. So we now have more room for the bust than at the waist, and we're keeping the back nice and tight so it won't be big and floppy. We haven't put any increases there. So I think it's looking pretty nice so far. And my next steps are to just keep on going, knitting in the pattern with the tuck stitches until I get to the point at which I'm ready to split into the 2 fronts and the back. So I'll check back in with you soon. Hello again. I have now finished knitting up until the underarms, which is where we divide into 2 fronts and a back. So at the moment, it is one big piece, and it's been really enjoyable. I've really enjoyed knitting this. The dots texture is really fun. It's sort of it's enough variation that you're doing the same thing for a couple of rows, and then it's a tuck row, and it just, oh, there's the next set of dots. So it's exciting. It's a fun knit. I'm enjoying it. So the next section, following the pattern, is to split it up and work on the left front section. So I'll be splitting off, casting off under the arm, and then knitting up the front. So thinking about how I'm going to be knitting this left front, and the big question, of course, is do I need to make any changes? I've made some changes already. I'm making this a more busty version to give myself a bit of room at the front, and I've given that room there. It's now come out, but I don't then stay out. My shoulder, matches my back. So I do want to come in a little bit as I go up. So my plan is after I've done the cast off and decreases for the underarm, as per the pattern, I'll then just slowly add a few more decreases in as we go up. So I've added in 4 dots in total compared to the waist. I don't want to decrease all of that, but I do want to decrease 2 dots because I'm worried about the shoulder of the front being too big, and I've had a little bit of a look at the stitches ahead, and I think decreasing by 2 dots worth, 8 stitches, will get me sitting nicely along the shoulder. Rightio, I'm going to press on. Let's get going on this left front. So I've now finished the left front. So I did the casting off and knit 2 together decreases as per the pattern, and then I did do 8 more knit 2 togethers every 6 rows. And then there's the neckline shaping up there. So I've now done the back, angling around the armholes and not going as high as the front. Once the body of the cardigan was all knit up, then I decided to proceed and join the shoulders straight away. I used a Kitchener stitch or 3-needle bind off, just joining at the top there, which is not a stretchy join, but I think that's okay for at the shoulders. A little bit of solidity is not a bad thing. I then wove in all my ends and was ready to try it on. I'm very happy with how it's going. I do wonder if the back is just still a little bit long, and I'm a little worried about the neckline, that's going to feel too high and uncomfortable. So we shall see. We shall see. The next section I worked on was the sleeves, which I started while I was away on holiday, and so I only filmed little snippets as I went. While I didn't do these sleeves 2 at a time, I did have them going at the same time on their own cable each and getting to the end of each section before moving on. I started with the cuff ribbing, for which I used a 3.5mm needle and then switched back to the 3.75 for the main body of the sleeves. I wanted a full-length sleeve, and the pattern is written for a bracelet-length sleeve, and so before starting to follow the pattern for the increases, I did 4 rounds of the repeat just straight up lengthening the bottom of my sleeve. Then I started the increases for the forearm as per the pattern, and at this point I realized I had really lucked out in my size. The pattern is written such that different sizes do increases at different numbers of rows, ranging from every 3 rows to every 11 rows. And for my size, it was every 4 rows. So that meant I could very regularly increase on rows 4, 8, and 12, which is just every second purl row. Very easy to keep track. It was a little tricky with the increases and the tuck stitches, and I made a couple of mistakes, but they were easily remedied, and overall the pattern is very clear and easy to follow. I found the next section of the sleeve a little tricky, as it involved casting off, tuck stitches, and carrying the yarn all at once, so I filmed my second sleeve in the hope that someone would find it useful. The next little bit is we're going to cast off before we then keep going on the sleeve ahead, and it's a little bit tricky because we're casting off, carrying the other yarn, and working our tuck stitch. Carrying, and then we can do it there, so knitting, 1, and I'm just going to move that over just to help me keep count. Two, 3, and then it's a tuck, 4, 5. So there we are. And that was the 5. So that's brought us in, and we can check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 stitches left, which is 5 left than 23. So now I'm just going to knit to the other end. I finished tucking along that row, so now we turn it over, and we need to do the same, or at least a similar thing again, but this time we're just casting off. We don't need to be tucking, and we don't need to be carrying the yarns behind, so it's much easier. One, 2, 3, 4, 5. So just a little bit cast off there, and then we keep purling back to finish this row 12. I finished purling across that row 12, and now switching to one of my contrast colours, holding the other two to the back. This is sort of between the last two because we do need to carry the other yarn, but we don't need to be tucking. And this time I'm doing 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there we are. We've cast them off using our active yarn, and these two have been carried along. And then we can knit along the rest of this row 1. So I've finished that row 1. Let's turn it over. And so on this side, casting off another 6. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I finish purling row 2. So after purling back for the rest of row 2, this is where we are. We have this end that is cast off that much with our other yarns carried along. We're cast off at that end, and I've adjusted my pins. I've moved these in to as far as I'm going to decrease in the first set of decreases, and place some new markers for when I'll then be decreasing in my second set of decreases. Then it was time for the shaping 1 section, decreasing every 4 rows in my size, which was a very pleasant counterpart to my increasing section. Shaping 2 is the final decrease section, which decreases more quickly and then you cast off, and I did do my own variation to this section. For many of the sizes, there are a small number of extra rows at the end to round out the pattern, but for my size there would be an extra 8 rows at the end, which is 2/3 of a repeat. So I decided to do my decreases every 2 out of 3 rows instead of every row and then the 8 rows by themselves. It makes total sense why the pattern doesn't do this, just so everything's as clear and consistent as possible, but I think I get a nicer shape by doing it this way. This section went very quickly, and once that was done, I had 2 sleeves. With a quick clipped try on, I think it's definitely looking sleeve-like. The length is feasible, although we won't really know until it's all blocked and finished. And yes, we're nearly there. So now I'm going to proceed with the button bands and the collar. I am progressing on the button band. I had to sort of brace myself and look up how to do the cast on, but then that went very easily once we got underway. It's a straightforward process to knit the ribbing, and the only thing I'll particularly note is that I knit when I'm doing the knit 2 together, I go through the back stitch. So let's have a look. One other thing to note is I did 9 stitches in my ribbing as opposed to the 7 because I wanted it just that little bit wider. From looking on Ravelry, it was a little bit narrow. And you can see here what happens if you just knit 2 together normally. So I find it's much neater just knitting through the back, which is what I started with instinctively. And then I thought, oh, maybe I should knit the other way, and like, no, I don't like that. So back to knitting through the back stitches I went. After knitting the left-hand button band, I then proceeded with the right-hand button band, which has the buttonholes, and that all went nice and smoothly. I picked up the stitches along the neck. Now it's time to knit the collar. And as a break from all that ribbing up there that is ongoing, I've now sewn on the buttons. Okay, back to the collar. And so now I have all 3 pieces ready to be sewn up and completed. The cardigan is finished, and overall I'd say this was a very successful project. It is a fun, vintage-inspired cardigan. It goes really quickly with all the tuck stitch repeats, and the instructions are really clear. As for the little puff sleeves on top, I'm not sure they sit exactly as I'd like them to. I may need to knit a little pillow to sit underneath them to get them sort of a bit more spread and puffy. I had worried that the button band would need a ribbon to stabilize it, but I think it's fine, so far at least. I am glad that I added that extra bit to it. I think this is a good width of button band. I'm not sure the collar really wants to stay. I'm glad I did it longer than the instructions said. I think there'd be no way at all that it would stay folded down if I'd done only the 20 rows. So I'm glad I did 30. All in all, I thought this was an excellent pattern, and I would highly recommend you give it a go if you're interested in having a cardigan a little bit like this. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you'll join me again next time. Goodbye.